The reason I record these videos is that I hate to see people fall off their memoir project just because they don't know what to do. So I talk a lot about mistakes. I've talked about everything from trying to go it alone and not get any kind of support or accountability, all the way through to not choosing just one topic or one message. But today, I want to talk about a very specific and a very easily solvable problem that I see happen so often. And this one mistake is going to lead you to every other mistake in the book. So I want to talk about it today. Stay tuned. If you're ready to climb out of the free advice rabbit hole and get some real one-on-one support, you are in luck. Currently, registration is open for the Memoir Method. This 9-month group program will give you everything you need, from training to support to real accountability. Learn more at pageandpodium.com/memoir-method. So the biggest mistake that you can make when you start writing your memoir is to skip the planning stage. Now, before you turn off this video, I know that that is a very, very basic mistake to make. And yet, I see so many people who really are hoping that they can just kind of skip this planning and development stage and jump right into the fun part of getting those words onto the page. Here's the problem. Most of the time, when we try to write a memoir without planning, we really end up all over the place. We end up either with a totally uncohesive manuscript that no reader is going to follow, or even more often, we just don't make any progress. So I want to talk today about how you can solve this mistake. It's very easy to solve, actually, and what you are going to get as an outcome when you do follow this process. So let's start by talking about what do I mean by planning your memoir, because there's a few things that I want to talk about here that all go together. It's a checklist of sorts of the things that you need to do to make sure you start off on the right foot. So the first of these is that you need an outline. Now, I know there is a lot of resistance to this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but trust me when I say you need an outline so that you know how much you need to accomplish. When we just say that we're writing a book, that is a huge, huge undertaking, and it gives us really no guidance at all in terms of how long the project's going to take, what we're going to need to do to get through it, how much we have left once we get into the middle. So you need to have an outline. You also need to have a writing schedule. Now, we have a tool that is specifically to help you figure this out, and you can download that for free at pageandpodium.com/calculator. It will help you kind of figure out your writing schedule and then, as a result, how much you need to be doing each day. But by writing schedule, all I mean is a tentative plan for during a typical week. When and for how long will you write? So for some people, that is you are going to be able to write every Saturday from 8 to 10 while their partner takes their kids for breakfast and shopping. Or you're going to get up every morning at 5, and Monday through Friday, you are going to write from 5 to 6 and kind of chip away at it that way. There is no wrong way to lay this out for yourself, but you must have a writing schedule. That's the second component. Just simply what days are you going to write and at what times on those days. And then the third thing is what's going to bring these together, the third piece of our plan. And that is a set of goals that tie together your outline and your writing schedule. We're going to bring it all together so you have one cohesive way forward. Now, what I mean by that is that if you are laying out your goals in terms of your writing schedule, let's say you're going to try to write 5 hours a week. You're going to do maybe that morning thing, 5 to 6 every morning, Monday through Friday. So that's about 5 hours a week of writing. What do you want to accomplish in those 5 hours? Are you going to try to get a chapter done every week? That is a great goal. You won't always hit that. Spoiler alert, you won't always be able to get that all done, but it's a good goal. You can use that goal to get started, and then you can kind of adjust and tweak from there. But having that outline will tell you how many chapters do I have, about how long are those chapters then going to need to be, and then how do I map that onto my writing schedule so that I can really objectively understand whether I'm making the progress I want or whether I need to make adjustments. Now, the planner I mentioned earlier, that's going to help you kind of look at the logistics of this. But where I find that there is the most resistance to having a plan is not in the writing schedule. Most people know they need that. And it isn't even really in the goals, because I do find that most people have some kind of a goal, have the book done by XYZ date, or, I want to do this many pages a day, whatever. Usually that is not where I see resistance. Where I see resistance, where you might be feeling resistance right now, is in writing an outline. And the thing about your outline is it is going to take you a long time, but then once you have it done, your writing will go so much faster. So in our group program, the Memoir Method, which shout out, our registration is open right now for the January cohort. In that program, what we will often say is that we are slowing down to speed up. Because when you make that outline, when you set that plan with those discrete goals that you are accountable to or not, we can really easily see that. What you are doing is giving yourself a roadmap, right? You know exactly where you need to go next, and you know whether you're on track or if you've fallen off. You can make adjustments then, right? But if we don't even have that roadmap, we're just driving around in the country hoping we get to a highway, right? What we need to do is figure out this outlining process. So I've got other videos, but I wanted to spend today talking about why I see that resistance and why it is so crucial that you overcome this in yourself. So let's start by talking about what do we see? What are we talking about when we talk about resistance to an outline? Well, this is going to show up in one of three ways, or sometimes all three, but listen for yourself to see if you have one of these pieces of resistance, and maybe is that what's holding you back? Okay, so the first way that we resist outlining, the first kind of way we justify to ourselves that we don't need an outline, is that we say we're going to figure it out as we go. Now, this is so sneaky. All of these are, by the way, because when we think about figuring it out as we go, probably you have heard authors talk about that. In fact, this is really, really common, and it's true. As we write, we are arranging words in particular ways. We're playing with meaning. We're playing with voice. We're looking at how events go together. We are figuring it out as we go, right? We are learning through the process of writing. And with memoir, that is so important. In fact, I would say that the number one thing you are going to get out of your memoir, even if you sell millions of copies, the number one thing you're going to get out of it is the knowledge of yourself and the experience you went through that you will gain as you write. That is absolutely true. But where this fools us is that we tend to think that in order to get that benefit of figuring things out, of kind of learning as we're writing, that we cannot have a plan. We have to give ourselves kind of this free, unfettered access to every thought in our mind so that we can figure things out. Well, there's a particular metaphor that I like to use that's really going to illustrate how we are harming ourselves when we get rid of the plan and just think we're going to figure it out as we go. Now, if you have dogs, I bet they love to go to the dog park. My dogs used to love to go to this dog park in the town that we lived in before I moved where I am now. And one of the things that I really loved about that dog park was that there were kind of two sections. There was a section for big dogs and a section for smaller dogs. And people just kind of on their honor went in the correct section, right? And between and around those sections was a fence. Now, you could argue by making those dogs play within that fenced area, they are not really getting to explore everything that they could, right? The little dogs aren't getting to interact with the big dogs. The big dogs don't get to interact with the little dogs, and none of them get to, sniff around and pee on things outside of that fence. They are in that fence. But if you have taken your dog to the dog park, you know that actually they have so much more fun because their owners can just let them play. Now, When you think about planning your memoir, I want you to think about that fence as your outline, right? When we outline, we are not planning every single word and every single idea and every single paragraph. We are simply giving ourselves some boundaries, a fence that we can then play within without having to worry that we're going to run out in traffic, right? To mix metaphors a little bit. We can play in that space. So you are still going to make the discoveries that you want to make. I would never ever give you advice that would rob you of that. You will still make those discoveries. But when you put that fence up, you are going to give yourself, paradoxically, so much more freedom to explore. So, are you going to figure it out as you go? Yes, everyone does. But that does not mean that you don't need an outline. Okay, so that's the first way I see this kind of resistance show up. The second way I see the resistance show up is also totally understandable, and that is that we are so anxious to start writing. We want to get to the fun part, so we don't want to slow down and work on this outline. This one's really sneaky too. Here is what I see happen when folks go down that road. Oftentimes when we set out to write a memoir, the first chapter or three, it kind of depends, but usually the first chapter or three, we already have kind of rehearsed in our mind, usually quite a bit. Usually I find when I am coaching people, the first couple of chapters, first few chapters, just really like fly onto the page, and they're usually pretty good. It's usually really clear that there's been some kind of workshopping that has happened in that author's mind even before they ever sat down to write a single word. So what happens is we think, I want to get to the fun part. And in the beginning, we can. In the beginning, we can sit down and get those words on the page and feel that dopamine surge of looking at how quickly that page is filling up, seeing that thing we've imagined just go onto the page and we can share it with others. Oh, it feels so good, right? That is the fun part. But I'm sure you saw this coming. Usually by the time we get to chapter 4, 5, 10, 15, 20, we do not have that same sense of rehearsal. We don't have that same kind of internal plan that we can draw on. We really are just struggling through in the dark, right? So when we tell ourselves kind of we want to get to this fun part, what we are really doing is setting ourselves up for a few weeks of fun, followed by usually years of slogging through, of giving up, of picking it back up, not really knowing what you're supposed to be doing. So this is a really big mistake, and it's really, really sneaky, but truly, I know you want to get to the fun part. The outlining can be fun, I promise. And even if it's not, again, we're going to slow down to speed up. We are going to make that plan, because then when you get to the fun part, it will be sustainably fun for the whole process of writing. Maybe not the whole process, but you will have a good time for more of it than if you try to go without a plan. And then that leads into the third way I see this resistance show up all the time, and that is that it's so tempting to get started on those early chapters, and sometimes we don't even want to start on the early chapters, right? Maybe you write chapter 1 and then you're kind of writing this scene over here, and you know you want to include this kind of bit of philosophical information. So you are really doing kind of all these little drafts, right? You've got all these pieces. Well, then what I see happen is then when we start to talk about outlining and planning, we have what we call the sunk cost fallacy. Now, if you're not familiar, all this means is that we as humans, if we are going down one particular path, we really, really hate to get a ways down that path and then turn around and come back. Once we have invested the time or the effort or the money or the energy to go down a particular path, to go a particular direction, we really hate to feel like we've lost that. Now, this happens in all areas of life, but I think the best example is when we think about like going to a casino or gambling, right? If you have ever played a slot machine, I like to play just like the penny slot, but if you have ever played a slot machine, you know that there is a point where you are just like losing and losing and losing and losing and losing. And what happens so often is that we think, oh yeah, but just like the next one's got to be it, right? Like I've put so much, I'm warming it up, right? That's my friend used to say, I'm warming it up. Statistically, we know this isn't true. Your odds do not change on a slot machine, right? Your odds are that ideally, if it's not been kind of tinkered with, your odds should be the same every single time you play. But because we have gone down this path of feeding our pennies into that penny slot, we really want to believe that we just need to keep going, right? We have sunk so much of our costs into that slot machine that we cannot bear to just give up and walk away. But in slot machines and in life, there are times when we have to evaluate what we're doing and realize it's not working. And this is true in memoir too. So if we start to write these different scenes, maybe a chapter here or there, but we haven't outlined, we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, pantsing, as the fiction writers call it. What very often happens is that when the idea of an outline comes up, the first thing we think of is, but I've already done so much work. Am I going to have to scrap it all? Now, I get this because you have done work usually, and oftentimes when I see this, people have pages and pages of miscellaneous stuff. So sometimes that will be some talk to text, sometimes you'll have some kind of research off of Wikipedia, you'll have social media posts that you'll have put in a document, plus the actual writing that you've done, some of those scenes or philosophical ideas, whatever it may be. The fallacy here is not that we shouldn't be turning around because we've invested so much. The fallacy is that doing an outline means you have to throw away all of that other stuff. It's not true, right? When we sit down to outline, it is still us who is in charge of doing that outline, right? We are still the ones that decide what goes in and what doesn't go in. So there is nothing to be gained by continuing down this route of pantsing when we really know that what we need is a plan. We really know we need an outline. So if you are resisting because you have a bunch of chunks and pieces, rest assured that you do not have to get rid of them all. And in fact, one resource that I can recommend for free, I have a video that I did a couple months ago called How to Turn a Journal into a Memoir. That might be really useful for you, even if it's not a journal that you're working with. Now, as you sit down and you make this plan, you're figuring out what your outline is, you're setting your writing schedule, and then you are setting chapter or page goals that correspond with your outline and your writing schedule. One of the things that will come up that I want to give you a heads up about is that oftentimes when you create your outline in the beginning, as I suggest you do, you will come upon a point at which you have got to revise that outline. A point at which what you are doing in the actual moment is going to deviate from what you had thought you would be doing at that moment. Now, what I want to tell you is that if you deviate from your outline, it's fine. No one will even know. The point is that the outline lets you set out a measuring stick that then you can evaluate to decide if you're on track, right? So if you get to chapter 5 and you think, oh my gosh, I thought this was 1 chapter and it's actually 3. That's fine, right? Then you just adjust your outline. You know now that it's going to take you a little bit longer. You've got additional chapters, right? Or if you kind of go down the path of this writing plan and you realize, oh shoot, I thought I was going to be able to do 5 hours a week. I've only got 2. That is fine. Again, you know what the consequences of that will be. It allows you to make an educated decision on whether you want to change course or whether you want to stay that course. But without the plan in the first place, you don't have the power to make that decision. You don't know what you are supposed to be doing, so you can't decide whether you want to continue to do it or do something different, right? So if you are resistant to outlining because you're afraid of what will happen if you deviate, do not be afraid of that. Instead, I want you to embrace that as a mechanism to empower yourself. Because you have this plan of what you are promising yourself that you're going to do, you are now able to make way smarter decisions about how you want to move forward. And that is not the only benefit that you're going to get from writing an outline, by the way. You will get tons of benefits. One of them is that you are going to be able to lay out your entire structure before you start writing so that you can very clearly see where your climax is falling, whether you have enough going on in what can become the saggy center of your book. You will know from the beginning that that book is going to move forward in the way that you want it to. You also will be able to use that outline to get pre-feedback before you have even started writing. If you do a detailed outline, this is what I suggest and what we do in the Memoir Method group program, enrolling now by the way, you can take that outline to a friend or an editor or any trusted person really, and have them look at your outline and give you feedback at that point. And because you've done that, you can make your adjustments before you move forward with that outline. A great opportunity to avoid another example of that sunk cost fallacy, right? Because you can get the feedback before you start moving ahead. And of course, the biggest benefit is that I promise you, by the time you get to chapter 15, 16, maybe earlier than that, you will be tired. I have written dozens of books, and if you pull in the people that I have coached over the years, it's even more than that. And one thing I can tell you, across the board, there will be a point when you are just tired of the project. When you have an outline, you have an end goal in sight, right? I used to run long distances. If you are a runner, you know that there's always a point in a race or even just a long run that you're doing when you're like, oh my gosh, how much is left? I used to try to tell myself the percentage that I had left, right? Count that down as I went. You can do that if you have an outline. You can say, all right, you know what? I am 3/4 of the way through. I just have 1/4. I've done that amount 3 times. I can do it once more, right? You know where you're headed. If you don't have that outline, you have no idea whether you are getting tired and you are only 1/3 of the way in. You have no plan. So there are so many benefits to writing an outline, to having a really solid plan, and I don't want you to miss out on them. When you skip this stage of planning, when you skip the development and the structure and the outline and the writing schedule, all you are doing is setting yourself up to feel really bad every time you sit down at the computer. And so often I see this just totally derail people's projects. So if this is something that you need help with, this channel has tons of resources on outlining and structure. You can also search for Page and Podium and you will find more resources on the internet, on our website. And if what you really need is somebody to talk you through this process of doing your outline, our group program, the Memoir Method, has a step-by-step layout. Seriously, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, that will take you through every single thing you need to do to make sure that your outline is solid, that your plan is going to support you, and that you are making the progress on that book that you want to make. So if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, head over to pageandpodium.com/memoir-method and you'll find everything that you need to get that application in for our new January cohort. But in the meantime, I want you to be thinking about your plan. Is your outline solid? Is your writing schedule solid? And are those goals you have set for yourself based in objective reality or wishful thinking? We're going to head toward the objective reality so that we can get this book done efficiently and well. Happy writing. Have you hit the brick wall of the information you're going to get from YouTube, podcasts, and Google? If so, now might be the time to get some real structured support. And now is a great time because we currently have registration open for our next cohort of the Memoir Method. In this 9-month group program, you will get access to a training vault with everything from step-by-step instructions on how to outline and plan, all the way through to tips on publishing and marketing your book. Plus, you'll get weekly group calls where you can ask your questions directly to Emily and I. You can get an expert opinion right when you need it. Plus, you'll get weekly check-ins to make sure you stay accountable and that community support I know you want. If you're ready, head over to pageandpodium.com/memoir-method to learn more and apply today.